The sun shone brightly over the arid landscape as Rizá Miller drove along a desert highway. The sky was a deep blue, and the heat made the asphalt seem to ripple in the distance. Rizá was alone, accompanied only by the steady hum of the engine and the occasional cars passing by in the opposite direction. He decided to take an alternate route to Santa Fe, New Mexico, hoping to avoid the heavy traffic of endless freight trucks that often clogged the main highway. The detour seemed like a good idea, a quieter path, surrounded by vast stretches of desert and low mountains that barely broke the horizon. The journey seemed to be going well, but as the day wore on, the monotony of the landscape began to take its toll. By noon, Rizá felt his eyelids growing heavy.
A coffee would have been a good idea before leaving,
he thought, trying to stay alert. Then something strange happened. He blinked. Just for an instant. When he opened his eyes again, daylight had vanished. Night had fallen abruptly, as if someone had switched off the sun. The steering wheel trembled slightly in his hands, and Rizá slowed down, blinking several times to make sure he wasn't dreaming. He glanced at the dashboard clock, 12:15 p.m. But darkness surrounded him as if it were midnight. A chill ran down his spine, but Rizá tried to stay calm.
Maybe I've entered a storm or something unusual,
he told himself. But there was no sign of clouds or bad weather. Just the night sky and an oppressive silence that seemed to have replaced the usual desert sounds. The only thing that mattered at that moment was his meeting in Santa Fe. Rizá had been preparing for weeks to close a deal with a group of local entrepreneurs, and he couldn't afford to be late. He pressed the accelerator, trusting he would soon find a sign or something to help him get his bearings. The speedometer climbed, and the yellow lines of the road flashed by with every second. But as he pushed forward, a growing sense of unease began to take hold of him. Rizá had been speeding for what felt like an eternity, yet he didn't seem to be getting anywhere. The horizon remained unchanged, the empty road stretched endlessly before him, growing darker with every kilometer. In the distance, he noticed a figure at the edge of the road, a young girl standing there, wearing a white dress that appeared to be tattered by the wind. Her presence in that vast desert expanse was unsettling, but what struck him most was the way she stood utterly still, seemingly unaffected by the weather or the surrounding darkness. Rizá frowned, slowing the car as he approached. What was someone doing there, alone, in the middle of nowhere? He thought she might be a traveler or someone with car trouble, but something about her posture unnerved him. The girl didn't look frightened or lost, just still, watching without moving a muscle. As he drove past her, Rizá glanced at her through the rearview mirror, expecting her figure to fade into the darkness. But to his surprise, she remained there, in the exact same spot, as if time hadn't moved. It was just a glimpse, almost imperceptible, but strange enough to make his stomach tighten with discomfort.
I must have imagined it,
he thought, pressing the accelerator once again. A few minutes passed, and the landscape remained unchanged, desolate, dark. However, an odd feeling enveloped him, as if the road itself wasn't changing, as if he were trapped in an endless loop. Had he passed through here before? The same stretch of road, the same mountains in the distance. Everything looked the same. Rizá fidgeted in his seat, glancing around, searching for some kind of sign or mile marker. But there was nothing. He looked to the left side of the vehicle, and then he saw her again. The girl, in the same spot, exactly as before, standing by the shoulder. It couldn't be a coincidence. Rizá realized he was passing through the same place once more. He was going in circles, and something didn't add up. The girl wasn't even moving, she was just there, fixed, like a statue. A cold sweat began to crawl down his back, and for a moment, he considered stopping to ask if she needed help, but quickly dismissed the thought. What if he was losing his way? He convinced himself that he had to keep going, but the worry clouded his mind. Suddenly, a thought gripped Rizá. Maybe he needed to find a reference point, some sign that he wasn't trapped in an illusion. What if the girl knew something about the road? It was ridiculous, he knew, but the anxiety he felt kept him from thinking clearly. Breathing heavily, he decided to stop the car. He turned off the engine and rolled down the window, his nervous eyes scanning the darkness as the figure of the girl remained motionless in the distance. He could see her face now, more clearly, a young woman with pale skin, deep eyes, as if she were staring right through him.
Hey, girl.
Rizá called out in a tense voice, feeling the situation growing more bizarre.
Sorry to bother you, but it seems I'm lost. I've been driving in circles on this road. Can you help me?
The girl took a few seconds to respond, as if she were in another world. Her face shifted slightly, but her expression didn't change. Then, in a soft, broken tone, she replied.
Sir, I could tell you, but you would get more lost. Why don't you let me into your car? And I'll show you.
Her voice sounded fractured, as if she were struggling to stay present in this world. Something about the way she spoke, the way she moved, seemed disconnected from reality. Rizá studied her closely, a sense of distrust growing in his chest. He didn't know why, but something told him not to let her in. Still, his desire to leave this place weighed heavier. He glanced around again. What else could he do? If he kept driving, the journey seemed endless.
All right,
he said finally, opening the passenger door with a slight tremor in his voice.
get in. But only until we're out of here.
The girl didn't say anything else. She simply walked toward the car and sat down, without looking directly at Rizá, as if she were completely absorbed in her own thoughts. As the girl settled into the seat, something began to change. The air in the car grew thick, as if the temperature had dropped suddenly. The girl didn't seem to be breathing like a normal person. Rizá tried to focus on the road, but a thick fog started to form in front of him. The road, which had once seemed endless, was now narrowing and darkening, as if he had entered a tunnel with no way out.
Keep going.
The girl murmured in an empty voice, staring out the window, as if she wasn't even there. Rizá couldn't help but shiver. The landscape passing by his window no longer looked familiar. Something was different, distorted, and he couldn't understand how or why. As he drove on, the miles on his odometer began to disappear, and the road seemed to stretch on farther and farther. The clock in his car read the same time. Was he going in circles, or had time stopped? The mile marker had disappeared, and with it, any sense of direction. Rizá felt fear creeping up his spine. The car's lights illuminated the road, which was growing narrower and darker, while a sense of claustrophobia took hold of him. The air inside the vehicle became thicker, and the murmurs coming from the girl beside him began to grow clearer. She muttered incomprehensible words, a low whisper that sent chills through his blood. Rizá turned toward her, and when he looked at her, he saw that the girl was swaying in her seat, as if struggling to stay upright. Her face was growing paler, and her eyes seemed unnaturally wide, as if they couldn't close. The discomfort he felt was palpable. What was happening? Suddenly, the girl straightened up and, in an empty voice, murmured,
"Turn here, to the left."
To the left?
Rizá said, confused and alarmed, looking through the rearview mirror to see if there was any sign or turn he might have missed. But he saw nothing on the road. He stopped the car, still not fully understanding, and asked,
What do you mean? There's nothing to the left.
The girl didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pointed with her hand to the left, without looking at him. It was a vacant direction, only darkness beyond the edge of the road. Rizá, irritated and with his heart racing, turned his head to the left, searching for any hint of a road. But there was nothing there, just the same desolate stretch of desert. The air inside the car became even tenser. The discomfort shifted into terror. He quickly turned toward the girl, but now she was right in front of him. Her large, wide-open eyes stared at him intently. Her face looked paler than ever. Then, abruptly, the girl said in an authoritative voice,
"Turn now."
Paralyzed by fear, Rizá couldn't help but immediately turn toward the direction she was pointing. And then he saw it, a road that hadn't been there before. A dark path, barely visible in the darkness, but clearly present. The feeling of panic intensified, but without thinking any further, he turned the wheel. The sound of the tires scraping the asphalt filled the car. How had this road appeared? And what did the girl want from him? With his heart racing, Rizá drove down the new road, still not fully understanding what had happened. After traveling another kilometer, he saw something that surprised him, lights in the distance. Finally, Santa Fe was before him, as normal as any other city. He felt a deep sense of relief, as if he had finally emerged from the tunnel. The feeling of terror began to fade, but he still felt a strange pressure in his chest. He decided that at the very least, he could thank the girl before continuing with his day, even if it was just for helping him find the right path. He turned toward the passenger seat to say something, but the girl was no longer there. The shock hit him like a hammer. He quickly looked around the car, but the empty seat was all he could see. A chill ran down his body as his mind tried to process what had just happened. Had the girl been real? Or had he been dreaming the whole time? Before he could process it, a deafening horn made him jump in surprise. A huge truck sped past on the road, barely brushing his car. Rizá jerked the steering wheel, almost losing control, and ended up off the road as the truck continued on without slowing down. He was shaking, and his mind kept spinning over what had occurred. However, as the truck disappeared into the distance, Rizá couldn't help but wonder if what he had just experienced had been a nightmare, or if there was something deeper he didn't understand. Something that, somehow, had trapped him on that endless road.